The Bennet household at Longbourn was rarely quiet, for with 5 daughters under one roof, life bustled with chatter, arguments and laughter. Yet on this particular afternoon, an excitement unlike any other filled the air, brought in by Mrs. Bennet, who hurried into the drawing room as though carrying the most precious news in the world. "My dear Mr. Bennet," she cried, hardly able to contain herself. "Have you heard the great news? Netherfield Park has been let at last." Her husband sat comfortably in his armchair by the fire, a book resting in his hand, his spectacles perched low upon his nose. He did not move with her urgency, nor match her enthusiasm. Instead, with the calm air of a man who had seen many of his wife's excitements come and go, he raised his eyes slowly and asked, "Has it indeed? I had not observed. And pray, who has taken it?" Mrs. Bennet clasped her hands dramatically. "A young man of large fortune, from the north of England. He came down on Monday to see the estate in a fine chaise and four, and was so delighted with the place that he agreed to take it immediately. He is to be in possession before Michaelmas. His name is Mr. Bingley. Think of it, my dear, a man of 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls." Mr. Bennet closed his book gently, his lips twitching with amusement. "How so? How could this possibly affect them?" Mrs. Bennet gasped as if he had asked the most foolish question in the world. "How can you be so tiresome? Of course, I mean he may fall in love with one of them. You must go and visit him immediately, Mr. Bennet, so that we may secure his acquaintance. Imagine, such a man of wealth and good fortune. Our daughters could not hope for better." With mock seriousness, Mr. Bennet asked, "Is it his design in settling here, then? To fall in love with one of our girls?" Mrs. Bennet stamped her foot lightly, half amused, half exasperated. "Design, fiddlesticks, but it is very likely, for why else should he come here? Oh, Mr. Bennet, you will not see reason. You must visit him at once. Surely you know what this could mean for our family. We have 5 daughters to think of, and no sons to inherit. You know how the estate must pass to Mr. Collins. What will become of us if the girls do not marry well?" Her voice trembled with urgency, betraying her constant anxiety for her daughters' futures. Mr. Bennet, with his usual wit, replied, "Indeed, it is a distressing situation. But perhaps you should send a letter to Mr. Bingley, telling him he is welcome to choose whichever daughter he likes best. Or better yet, perhaps you might make the offer yourself." Mrs. Bennet's eyes widened. "Offer myself? You take delight in vexing me, Mr. Bennet. You have no compassion on my poor nerves." "You mistake me, my dear," he said, smiling faintly. "I have the highest respect for your nerves. They have been my constant companions these 20 years at least." Elizabeth, who had been quietly sewing nearby, hid a smile behind her hand, amused at her father's teasing. Jane, ever gentle and kind, attempted to calm her mother, though Kitty and Lydia were already whispering excitedly about officers and dances. Mary, in her usual solemn way, muttered something about how frivolous such talk was, but nobody paid her much attention. Mrs. Bennet, still brimming with energy, pressed on. "If you do not call upon Mr. Bingley, we shall be at a disadvantage. Lady Lucas will certainly go, and then she will boast of her connections, and we shall be left behind. Oh, Mr. Bennet, think of Jane, so beautiful, so good-natured. She deserves such a match." Mr. Bennet's face softened for a moment, though he hid it quickly behind a mask of irony. "Jane does indeed deserve happiness. But who is to say Mr. Bingley might not prefer Elizabeth, or perhaps Mary if he is fond of books? Kitty and Lydia would surely recommend themselves with their giggles. He will be spoiled for choice, I think." The daughters blushed, laughed, or frowned in turn, while Mrs. Bennet wrung her hands. "You will see him, Mr. Bennet. Promise me you will call upon him before the week is out," she pleaded. But Mr. Bennet merely returned to his book with an air of indifference, refusing to give a clear answer. Mrs. Bennet's nerves were in tatters as the evening drew on, her impatience growing with each passing moment. Yet beneath his quiet, teasing manner, Mr. Bennet had already resolved that he would call upon Mr. Bingley, though he saw no need to reveal this secret just yet. And so, the Bennet household buzzed with hope and expectation. A wealthy new neighbour had arrived, and with him the possibility of love, fortune, and future security. Little did they know that this single event, the letting of Netherfield Park, would soon set in motion a story of pride, prejudice, and the most unexpected love. The next morning at Longbourn, Mrs. Bennet was restless. She paced about the parlour, her hands fluttering like little birds, her mind occupied by only one thought. "Mr. Bingley, I declare," she muttered. "If Mr. Bennet will not call on him, we shall lose every chance. Lady Lucas is sure to go first, and then she will crow about her intimacy until I am quite sick of it." Her daughters listened with varying degrees of interest. Lydia and Kitty, forever whispering together, were already imagining the officers who might attend the balls Mr. Bingley would surely host. Jane, sweet and patient, tried to reassure her mother. "I'm certain Papa means to visit him. He would not disappoint us so." Elizabeth, with her lively eyes, smiled knowingly. "Papa enjoys keeping us all in suspense. He will not tell his plans until it pleases him." Mary, serious and absorbed in her books, frowned. "It would be better to concern ourselves with study than with dances and strangers." But Mrs. Bennet would not be calmed. She sat down suddenly, fanning herself in distress. "Oh, my poor nerves. So if only Mr. Bennet would take his duty seriously. What will become of us if the girls cannot secure good marriages?" At that very moment, Mr. Bennet entered the room, his calm presence a striking contrast to his wife's agitation. He looked about at his daughters, then at his wife, and said casually, "I hope Mr. Bingley will like it here in Hertfordshire." Mrs. Bennet's eyes widened. "Like it here? How can you speak of his likes when you will not even visit him? Surely you must know it is your responsibility as head of this family to make the acquaintance." Mr. Bennet adjusted his cuffs and replied with deliberate slowness, "Responsibility? I had considered leaving the task to you, my dear. You are as skilled in persuasion as any man, and with such nerves as yours, Mr. Bingley will be quite overwhelmed." "Mr. Bennet, you delight in vexing me," she cried. "You always take pleasure in teasing when I'm in earnest." The daughters tried to hide their smiles, accustomed to their father's playful sarcasm. Elizabeth in particular struggled not to laugh outright. Just then Mr. Bennet, unable to resist prolonging the game, added, "Perhaps I shall send you all without me. Mr. Bingley might find himself charmed at once by Lydia's lively spirits, or Jane's beauty, or Elizabeth's wit. I do not see why you need my assistance at all." The room filled with laughter, except for Mrs. Bennet, who threw up her hands in exasperation. "Very well, sir," she said, "if you will not act, then we are doomed to see him go to some other family." Mr. Bennet, however, only smiled quietly, saying no more. What no one yet knew, not even Mrs. Bennet herself, was that he had already visited Mr. Bingley earlier that very morning. With his usual blend of duty and mischief, he had gone alone to Netherfield Park, introduced himself politely and secured the acquaintance. He had chosen not to reveal this at once, preferring instead to enjoy the drama his silence created at home. Later that evening, when Mrs. Bennet once again returned to the subject, Mr. Bennet, with a sly twinkle in his eye, finally confessed, "I paid Mr. Bingley a visit this morning." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then the parlour erupted. Kitty and Lydia squealed with delight. Jane's cheeks flushed softly. Elizabeth laughed outright. And Mrs. Bennet was so overjoyed that she declared she had never been so happy in her life. "Oh, Mr. Bennet," she exclaimed, "how good you are! I knew you would not abandon us. You are the best husband in all the world." Mr. Bennet, with quiet amusement, only replied, "I hope you will tell Mr. Bingley so when you meet him. It may do me credit." And with that the Bennet household buzzed with anticipation. Soon they would meet the wealthy new neighbour, and with him the chance for change, excitement, and perhaps even love. The long-anticipated evening of the Meryton Assembly arrived, and the Bennet household was alive with excitement. Gowns had been carefully pressed, ribbons chosen, and every curl pinned with care. Mrs. Bennet flitted anxiously from one daughter to another, fussing over Jane's gown, smoothing Elizabeth's hair, and urging Kitty and Lydia not to waste all their smiles before they even reached the ballroom. "My dear girls," she cried, "tonight is of the greatest importance. Mr. Bingley will be there, and if we conduct ourselves properly, he will see at once that Jane is the loveliest creature in the room." Elizabeth exchanged a quick glance with Jane, both amused and embarrassed by their mother's eagerness. At last, the Bennet family carriage rattled its way to Meryton. The town assembly rooms glowed with candles, laughter, and music. Gentlemen in fine coats and ladies in their best gowns filled the space, while musicians tuned their instruments in the corner. The atmosphere was merry and full of anticipation. The moment Mr. Bingley entered, a ripple of admiration spread across the room. He was indeed handsome, with a cheerful countenance and a pleasant manner that put everyone at ease. He greeted strangers warmly, danced every dance with unflagging spirit, and spoke kindly to all. It was not long before he asked Jane Bennet to dance, and the two were soon gliding gracefully across the floor. Mrs. Bennet nearly burst with pride. Do you see how well he admires her?" she whispered loudly to her neighbours. "I knew it at once. Jane will be the chosen one." But the attention of the room soon shifted when Mr. Bingley's party was joined by his sisters and his close friend, Mr. Darcy. Darcy was tall, fine and handsome, but his proud bearing and reserved manner made a very different impression from Bingley's warmth. He spoke little, looked about the room with cool indifference, and when introduced, gave short bows without much conversation. At first, the ladies admired his noble appearance, whispering about his wealth, 10,000 a year. But his coldness soon silenced their admiration. Elizabeth, curious by nature, observed him quietly as she enjoyed her evening. Later, while she stood talking with her friend Charlotte Lucas, she happened to overhear a conversation between Bingley and Darcy. "I must have you dance, Darcy," Bingley said cheerfully. "It is a shame to see you standing about in this stupid manner. You had much better dance." "I certainly shall not," Darcy replied coolly. "At such an assembly as this, there is not a woman in the room whom it would not be a punishment for me to stand up with." Elizabeth raised her brows at his arrogance, but said nothing. Bingley laughed good-naturedly. "Upon my honor, I never met with so many pleasant girls in my life. You are quite determined to be critical, Darcy. Look, there is my partner's sister, Miss Elizabeth Bennet. She is very pretty and I dare say agreeable. Do let me ask my partner to introduce you." Darcy glanced toward Elizabeth with a dismissive air. "She is tolerable, I suppose, but not handsome enough to tempt me. I am in no humor at present to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men." Elizabeth's eyes widened, and then a smile tugged at her lips. She turned quickly away, refusing to let his insult wound her. Instead, she shared the story with her friends later, laughing at Darcy's haughty pride. "Not handsome enough to tempt him," she repeated with a playful tone. "I could easily forgive his pride if he had not mortified mine." Her wit drew laughter from Charlotte and others, and soon Mr. Darcy's insult became a favourite story among the young ladies of Meryton. Meanwhile, Jane spent the evening happily with Mr. Bingley, who showed her the utmost attention. His sisters observed her with critical eyes, but could not deny her beauty or her gentle manner. By the time the ball ended and the Bennet family returned home, Mrs. Bennet was overflowing with delight. "What an evening! What an evening!" she cried. "Mr. Bingley danced with Jane twice, I say, and you all saw how he admired her. As for Mr. Darcy, well, I shall never think well of him again. Horrid, disagreeable man. I do not care how rich he is." Elizabeth, though secretly amused, said nothing more. She had already formed her opinion. Mr. Bingley was amiable, generous and full of warmth, while Mr. Darcy was proud, arrogant, and far too certain of his own worth. Thus, in one evening, admiration and dislike had been sown, the beginning of a story that would change all their lives. The Bennet household was still abuzz with talk of the Meryton Ball when an unexpected letter arrived. Mr. Bennet received it at breakfast, breaking the seal while his family watched curiously. He read the letter aloud, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Dear sir, the disagreement between yourself and my late father has long been a source of regret to me. I hope to make amends by beginning a friendship with your family. As heir to your estate, I feel it my duty to offer every civility. Therefore, I wish to visit you and your daughters at Longbourn this Saturday. I remain, dear sir, your respectful cousin William Collins." Mrs. Bennet's eyes widened. "Mr. Collins, the very man who will inherit Longbourn when you are gone, Mr. Bennet. Well, it is high time he showed some kindness. But why does he come now?" Elizabeth, curious, asked, "What sort of man is he, Papa? Do you know him?" Mr. Bennet chuckled. "From his letter, I suspect he is a very earnest man, perhaps overly so. We shall judge him when he arrives." On Saturday, Mr. Collins made his appearance, a tall, heavy-looking young man of about 25, with an air of self-importance that seemed to grow with every step he took. His manners were stiff, his compliments rehearsed, and his conversation so full of solemn flattery that it was hard to know whether to laugh or feel embarrassed for him. From the moment he was welcomed inside, he began to speak in a tone of grave politeness. "My dear cousins," he said, bowing deeply to the Bennet daughters, "what a great happiness it is for me to be in your presence. I cannot express the extent of my admiration for your distinguished family, though modesty forbids me from praising you as you deserve." The sisters exchanged glances, half amused and half astonished. Elizabeth bit back a smile while Jane, ever kind, listened politely. Lydia and Kitty giggled behind their hands. Mr. Collins continued with unshaken confidence. "I must take this opportunity to mention my patroness, the Right Honourable Lady Catherine de Bourgh. She has condescended to bestow upon me the living of Hunsford Parish. She is truly the most generous, noble-minded lady one could imagine. Her advice on every matter, spiritual, domestic, even agricultural, is beyond compare." Elizabeth, trying not to laugh, asked, "Does she often advise her clergyman?" "Oh yes," Mr. Collins said proudly. "She has deigned to dictate even the smallest improvements in my parsonage, how many shelves for my books, how I should arrange my garden, even the proper height for my chimney. Her taste is impeccable." Elizabeth's eyes sparkled with mischief, but she remained silent. At dinner, Mr. Collins's behavior became still more absurd. He praised every dish excessively, complimented Mrs. Bennet on her fine daughters, and even admired the furniture of the house with exaggerated reverence. When Mrs. Bennet hinted at his future inheritance, he cleared his throat solemnly. "It is my earnest desire to heal the breach between our families, and to prove my sincerity, I have resolved to choose a wife from among my fair cousins. It is the duty of a clergyman to set an example of marriage, and who could be more suitable than one of you young ladies?" The daughters stared in astonishment, while Mrs. Bennet, delighted, nearly clapped her hands. "A wife from among my girls? What generosity, Mr. Collins, what wisdom!" Elizabeth, however, felt a sinking sense of dread. She saw at once that Mr. Collins's intentions were ridiculous, and that his pompous manners would make him a most disagreeable husband. But Mrs. Bennet, already plotting, had another vision. If one of her daughters married Mr. Collins, Longbourn would remain in the family after all, and so with the arrival of Mr. Collins, the comedy of proposals and refusals was about to begin. A few days after Mr. Collins's arrival, the Bennet sisters walked into Meryton to visit their Aunt Phillips and to browse the shops. The town was lively, filled with soldiers from a newly stationed militia regiment. Kitty and Lydia, thrilled at the sight of red coats, giggled and whispered to each other as they passed groups of officers. It was on this bustling afternoon that the Bennet sisters first encountered a handsome young man in regimentals. His figure was striking, his manners open and engaging, his smile bright enough to win instant favor. He introduced himself as Mr. Wickham, recently attached to the regiment. Elizabeth noticed at once how easily he spoke, polite without stiffness, lively without arrogance. Unlike Mr. Darcy, who seemed to guard his words, Wickham's conversation flowed effortlessly, and his attentive eyes gave the impression of genuine interest. As fate would have it, the party was soon joined by Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley, who came riding down the street. Bingley greeted the ladies warmly, but Darcy, as reserved as ever, stiffly bowed and said little. Elizabeth's sharp eyes did not miss the sudden change in Wickham's face when he saw Darcy. For the first time, Wickham's easy charm faltered. Darcy too stiffened, his expression hardening into something darker. The two men bowed coldly, exchanged not a word, and then passed one another like strangers. Elizabeth, curious, could not forget the moment. Later, when she and Wickham walked a little way with her sisters, she asked gently, "You seemed surprised at Mr. Darcy's presence, sir. Do you know him?" Wickham gave a sigh as though the memory were painful. "Yes, indeed. We grew up together on the estate of his father, who was ever kind to me. But Mr. Darcy," he broke off, then continued with apparent reluctance, "I must not speak ill of him, though he has wronged me cruelly. Still, since you ask, he denied me the living his father had intended for me, leaving me with nothing. He is a proud, selfish man, Miss Bennet, one who thinks little of those beneath him." Elizabeth's eyes flashed. She recalled Darcy's insult at the ball, his cold manners, his disdain for her family. Wickham's words fit perfectly with the opinion she had already formed. "I can well believe it," she said warmly. "I have found him most disagreeable. Your misfortune only proves what I've suspected. Mr. Darcy is not the man his appearance suggests." Wickham smiled gratefully, as if relieved to find someone who understood. "You are very kind, Miss Bennet. Few dare oppose him, for his fortune and connections make him powerful. But I cannot forgive the injustice." Elizabeth's sympathy deepened. How different this Wickham was, frank, charming and engaging, compared with the proud, silent Darcy. When they returned home, Elizabeth repeated the tale to Jane and Charlotte Lucas. Jane, with her usual gentle nature, hesitated. "We must not believe evil of anyone too quickly. Perhaps there is some mistake." But Elizabeth, her prejudice confirmed, replied firmly, "No, Jane, his pride is plain to see. I think Mr. Wickham's story explains him perfectly." That evening, Mrs. Bennet had little patience for the subject. She was too busy pushing Mr. Collins to notice her daughter's conversations. But Elizabeth went to bed with her mind full of Wickham's words, convinced she now knew the truth about Mr. Darcy. And so, while Mr. Bingley's affection for Jane grew, Elizabeth's dislike of Darcy hardened, her judgment clouded by Wickham's charm and her own wounded pride. The Bennet household had not yet recovered from Mr. Collins's long speeches about Lady Catherine when he suddenly announced over breakfast, with all solemnity, that he had made up his mind. "My dear Mrs. Bennet," he said, puffing his chest with importance, "the time has come for me to fulfill a most serious duty. I have resolved to marry without delay, and as I consider it my obligation to choose one of my fair cousins, I shall present my proposal this very morning." Mrs. Bennet nearly dropped her spoon. She glanced at Jane, who blushed and looked away, and then at Elizabeth, who raised her eyebrows with suspicion. Mrs. Bennet, whispering furiously, declared, "Lizzie, it must be you. Jane is already destined for Mr. Bingley. You cannot be so foolish as to refuse him." Elizabeth turned pale but said nothing. When breakfast ended, Mr. Collins seized his moment. He requested a private audience with Elizabeth in the drawing room. Mrs. Bennet, beaming with triumph, herded the other daughters away, whispering loudly, "Do not worry, Mr. Collins. She will not say no." Elizabeth, left alone with her pompous cousin, felt an odd mix of dread and amusement. Mr. Collins cleared his throat, bowed formally and began his speech. "My dear Miss Elizabeth, the circumstances of my life lead me to the most advantageous decision of entering into matrimony. As a clergyman, it is my duty to set the example of marriage to my parishioners. As heir to this estate, it is my responsibility to secure harmony between our families. And as a man blessed with Lady Catherine de Bourgh's guidance, I cannot imagine a greater felicity than to marry you." Elizabeth could hardly restrain her laughter at the absurd gravity with which he spoke. She tried to interrupt politely, but Mr. Collins raised a hand. "Allow me to continue, for I must present my arguments fully. Firstly, it is the wish of my noble patroness, Lady Catherine, that I should marry quickly. Secondly, such a marriage will atone for the painful fact that your father's estate must one day pass to me. And thirdly, Miss Elizabeth, your modest fortune is no objection, for I am well provided for by the generosity of Lady Catherine. Thus you see my reasons are unanswerable." He ended with another bow, smiling with the confidence of a man who fully expected acceptance. Elizabeth rose, her voice firm, though courteous. "You are too hasty, sir. I am grateful for the honor of your proposal, but I cannot accept." Mr. Collins blinked, then chuckled as though she had made a charming joke. "Ah, modesty. All young ladies reject at first. It is the proper custom. I shall hope for your consent when I renew my addresses." Elizabeth's face hardened. "You are mistaken. I'm serious. I do not feel for you the kind of regard that could make me happy in marriage, and you could not make me happy either. Believe me when I say your proposal must be declined." Still smiling, Mr. Collins pressed on. "I know it is the fashion for elegant young ladies to say no, even when they mean yes. Lady Catherine herself assures me that such modest refusals are only encouragement. Therefore, I shall interpret your words in the most hopeful manner." Elizabeth's patience snapped. Her eyes flashed as she said firmly, "I am not one of those young ladies, Mr. Collins. I am sincere in my refusal. Nothing you could say will make me reconsider. I would be the most unhappy wife, and you, I suspect, a most unhappy husband. Please let us end this." This time Mr. Collins faltered. His smile slipped, his pompous confidence wavered. He stood in awkward silence, bowing stiffly before muttering that he must consult Mrs. Bennet. When Elizabeth left the room, Mrs. Bennet pounced. "Well, what did you say? Of course you accepted." Elizabeth's calm reply, "I refused him," sent her mother into a frenzy. "Refused him? Refused him? How can you be so headstrong, Lizzie? Do you not realize what you have done? He is the heir to Longbourn. You have thrown away your only chance to secure this family's future." Elizabeth, though shaken, stood her ground. "I could never make him happy, Mama, and he could never make me happy. That is reason enough." Mr. Bennet, overhearing the argument, finally intervened with dry amusement. "Your mother insists you marry Mr. Collins. I say you shall not. Now, Lizzie, from this day you must be a stranger to one of your parents, your mother if you do marry him, or me if you do not." Elizabeth smiled gratefully at her father. Mrs. Bennet, on the other hand, burst into tears of frustration, declaring Lizzie the most ungrateful child alive. Thus ended Mr. Collins's absurd proposal, an event that left the household divided, Mrs. Bennet furious, Mr. Bennet amused, and Elizabeth both relieved and troubled by what new complications might arise. The Bennet household remained unsettled after Elizabeth's shocking refusal of Mr. Collins. Mrs. Bennet could not forgive her daughter. She spent her days complaining bitterly, sighing loudly, and declaring to anyone who would listen that Lizzie had ruined them all. "Such a foolish girl," she cried to Kitty and Lydia. "To refuse a man with a comfortable living, patronized by Lady Catherine herself, and heir to Longbourn. What will become of us?" Elizabeth bore these reproaches with patience, though her heart ached. Her only comfort was her father's steady support. For Mr. Bennet teased his wife with gentle humor whenever her lamentations grew too dramatic. But Mr. Collins, though mortified by Elizabeth's firmness, was not a man to waste time in despair. His self-love was too strong, and his sense of duty to Lady Catherine too pressing. Within 2 days of his rejection, his attentions began to turn elsewhere, this time toward Miss Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's sensible and plain-looking friend, Charlotte. At 27, had long accepted that she might never marry. She was neither pretty nor wealthy, and her chances were few, yet she was practical, steady, and sharp-eyed. She had watched Mr. Collins's proposal to Elizabeth with quiet calculation. Where Elizabeth saw absurdity, Charlotte saw opportunity. When Mr. Collins called at the Lucas home, he found a warm reception. Sir William Lucas, ever eager to please, praised him extravagantly, while Lady Lucas encouraged her daughter to converse with him. Charlotte listened with composure to his endless praises of Lady Catherine and responded with nods and polite remarks that flattered his vanity. Elizabeth was unaware of what was happening until, one morning, Charlotte called her aside and, with calm seriousness, confided Lizzie, "I wish to tell you something before it becomes public. Mr. Collins has proposed to me, and I have accepted him." Elizabeth stared at her in disbelief. "Charlotte, you cannot be serious. You know he is ridiculous, vain, pompous, insufferable." Charlotte's expression was steady. "Yes, Lizzie, he is not a sensible man, but he will provide me with a home, security, and independence from my family. I ask only a comfortable life, not romance. I am not as young as you, and I cannot afford to be romantic. Do not judge me too harshly." Elizabeth's heart sank. She had always thought Charlotte too sensible to make such a choice. Yet Charlotte's calm reasoning revealed the harsh truth of her position. When the news reached the Bennets, Mrs. Bennet was aghast. "Charlotte Lucas, that scheming girl has stolen him from under our noses. Oh, Lizzie, this is all your fault." Mr. Bennet, however, chuckled. "Charlotte deserves him, my dear. They are well matched. His nonsense will be well endured by her patience. We should wish them joy." Elizabeth, though she tried to reconcile herself to the news, could not help feeling disheartened. Charlotte's decision seemed to mock her own ideals of love and happiness. She wondered for the first time whether her refusal had been too hasty, or whether Charlotte had sacrificed too much for security. Still, the engagement was soon celebrated in the Lucas household with modest joy, and Mr. Collins, now fully recovered from his humiliation, strutted about with pride, convinced he had made the wisest of choices. Thus, the irony was complete. Elizabeth had refused Mr. Collins to preserve her dignity, and her closest friend had accepted him in exchange for comfort. The paths of the two women were now set in strikingly different directions. The long-anticipated ball at Netherfield Park arrived at last. From early morning, the Bennet household was in a storm of excitement. Mrs. Bennet fussed over gowns, ribbons and lace, while Lydia and Kitty chattered endlessly about which officers might dance with them. Jane, calm and gentle as always, looked forward only to seeing Mr. Bingley. Elizabeth, though eager for her sister's sake, dreaded the possibility of another unpleasant encounter with Mr. Darcy. That evening, the Bennets arrived at Netherfield in their carriage, joining the glittering company that filled Bingley's fine house. Chandeliers glowed overhead, music drifted through the halls, and the air was alive with expectation. Jane was soon claimed for the first dances by Mr. Bingley, whose warm and attentive manner left little doubt of his growing affection. Mrs. Bennet, watching from her seat, whispered loudly enough for half the room to hear, "It will not be long before Jane is mistress of Netherfield. Mark my words, she will be married within the year." Elizabeth flushed with embarrassment, praying no one else had heard, but Darcy, standing nearby, certainly had. Later, to Elizabeth's astonishment, Mr. Darcy himself approached her. With grave formality, he requested the honor of a dance. Startled, she hesitated, but unable to find an excuse, she accepted. As they moved through the figures of the dance, conversation was strained. Elizabeth, determined to tease, remarked on his silence, "I might believe you enjoy our dance more if you spoke a little, Mr. Darcy. Silence can be most unflattering." Darcy's lips curved into the faintest smile. "And what shall I speak of, Miss Bennet?" "Of our partners, of course," Elizabeth replied with mischief. "It is the usual topic." "Then I might ask what you think of mine," Darcy said, his eyes steady on hers. Elizabeth, caught off guard, laughed. "That is not a fair question, sir, when I am she." Their exchange, though sharp, carried a curious undercurrent, yet Elizabeth's prejudice remained strong. She could not forget Wickham's tale of injustice, nor Darcy's proud reserve. The evening's pleasures were soon soured by the behavior of Elizabeth's family. Mrs. Bennet, in her delight at Jane's success with Bingley, spoke too freely, boasting of the marriage she already considered settled. Lydia and Kitty laughed and flirted shamelessly with the officers, drawing amused but disapproving glances. Mary, eager to display her talents, insisted on performing at the pianoforte, playing with such earnestness, but such lack of refinement, that her exhibition became an ordeal rather than entertainment. Elizabeth's mortification grew with every passing moment. She saw Darcy observing the scene with an expression of restrained disdain, and though she resented him, she could not deny the truth. Her family was making a spectacle of themselves. By contrast, Jane and Bingley shone together, their mutual affection clear to all. Elizabeth's heart warmed at her sister's happiness, even as her own evening seemed filled with discomfort and embarrassment. When the ball ended, Mrs. Bennet could speak of nothing but Jane's triumph. Did you see how devoted he was? And Mr. Darcy too. Why, Lizzie, he danced with you. You may have your fortune secured yet." Elizabeth, weary of the entire evening, only sighed. She thought of Wickham, who had been absent from the ball, and of Darcy, whose attentions puzzled her more than she wished to admit. Thus the Netherfield Ball, meant to be a night of joy, ended with a mixture of triumph, unease, and lingering prejudice, threads that would soon be woven into far greater complications. The days following the Netherfield Ball were filled with restless anticipation at Longbourn. Jane awaited another visit from Mr. Bingley, her gentle heart convinced of his affection. Mrs. Bennet could scarcely speak of anything else. "He will propose before the week is out. I am certain of it," she declared, bustling about the house. "Mark my words, Jane shall soon be mistress of Netherfield, and then all of us will be well provided for." But as the days passed, no visit came. Then, without warning, a letter arrived from Miss Caroline Bingley. Jane opened it with eager hands, but as her eyes moved over the page, her colour drained. Elizabeth, watching anxiously, asked what was wrong. Jane forced a smile, though her voice trembled as she read aloud, "My dear friend, we have left Netherfield for town, where we shall remain for the winter. My brother is most desirous of renewing his acquaintance with Miss Darcy, whose charms and accomplishments, I trust, will soon make her the happiest of women. I hope you will rejoice with me in this future connection. Ever yours, Caroline Bingley." Mrs. Bennet gasped. "Gone to London? And Miss Darcy? What nonsense! He is in love with you, Jane. He will be back within the fortnight, I am sure." But Elizabeth saw more clearly. The letter was artfully written, but its meaning was plain. Caroline Bingley had no intention of allowing Jane near her brother again. Jane, with her unshakable sweetness, tried to excuse them. Perhaps Caroline is mistaken. Perhaps Mr. Bingley himself had no part in this. "We must not think ill of them," Elizabeth's eyes flashed. "Mistaken? No, Jane, they have planned this together. Caroline and perhaps Mr. Darcy too. They wish to separate you from Bingley, and I cannot forgive them." In the weeks that followed, Jane bore her disappointment with quiet dignity. Though her heart was heavy, she never complained. She smiled. She helped her mother, she soothed her sisters, but Elizabeth, who knew her too well, saw the sadness behind her gentleness. Mrs. Bennet, however, was less restrained. She stormed through the house in fury, declaring the Bingleys deceitful, ungrateful, and unworthy of Jane. "They shall rue the day they slighted my daughter," she cried. "But I always said Lizzie should have taken Mr. Collins. Now look where we are." Elizabeth paid her no heed. Her anger was not loud but deep. In her mind, the guilty figure of Mr. Darcy loomed larger than ever. It must be he, she thought, who had persuaded Bingley to leave. His pride, his arrogance, his disdain for her family, yes, it was all of a piece. One evening, as Jane sat quietly by the fire, Elizabeth took her hand. "You deserve better, dearest Jane. If Bingley were truly worthy of you, nothing could have separated him from you. I only hope he suffers half as much as you have suffered." Jane shook her head gently. "No, Lizzie, we must not wish ill on others. If he is happy even with another, then I shall be content." Elizabeth's heart ached at her sister's forbearance. She vowed silently that if ever she had the chance, she would hold Darcy to account for his interference. Thus, the winter at Longbourn began under a shadow. Jane's quiet heartbreak, Mrs. Bennet's noisy lamentations, and Elizabeth's sharpened resentment toward Mr. Darcy, resentment that would soon meet its trial when their paths crossed again. Spring brought with it a new adventure for Elizabeth. A letter from Charlotte Lucas, now Mrs. Collins, arrived, warmly inviting her to visit Hunsford Parsonage. Elizabeth, eager to see her old friend in her new life, and curious to observe Mr. Collins in his natural domain, accepted gladly. She set out in the company of Sir William Lucas and his second daughter Maria. The journey was pleasant, and Elizabeth's spirits were high when they approached Hunsford. The little parsonage stood neat and trim, with a well-swept path and carefully arranged shrubs. Mr. Collins, waiting at the gate, bustled forward with pompous delight. "Dearest cousin," he cried, bowing so low that his hat nearly fell off. "What condescension, what generosity, to honour our humble abode with your presence. You will find Hunsford a model of comfort, all by the design of Lady Catherine herself, who suggested every improvement." Charlotte, calm and composed, welcomed Elizabeth warmly. As Elizabeth looked around the tidy house, she could not help noticing how Charlotte bore her husband's absurdities with quiet patience, guiding his conversations, redirecting his boasts, and smiling gently when he became too ridiculous. That first evening, Elizabeth saw plainly what her friend had meant when she had defended her choice. Charlotte had married for security, not romance, but she had found contentment in managing her household and making the best of her situation. Elizabeth admired her sense, even if she pitied the price she had paid. The next day, Mr. Collins could scarcely contain his excitement. "This evening, my dear cousin, you shall have the honour of dining at Rosings Park, the noble seat of Lady Catherine de Bourgh herself. Prepare to witness grandeur such as you have never seen." Elizabeth exchanged a glance with Charlotte, who smiled faintly as if to say, "You shall soon see what we endure daily." When they arrived at Rosings, Elizabeth was struck by the sheer size of the estate, though the elegance within was somewhat diminished by heavy grandeur. Lady Catherine de Bourgh, a tall, commanding woman with sharp features and a voice used to authority, received them with imperious courtesy. "So this is Miss Bennet," she said, examining Elizabeth as though she were a specimen. "You are one of 5 sisters, I hear. All out at once. What is your age?" Elizabeth, with composure, replied, "I am not yet 21." Lady Catherine nodded approvingly at her own question. "You speak well enough, but your family, I suppose, has no governess?" "No, madam," Elizabeth answered lightly. "We were always encouraged to learn as we chose." "Outrageous. Young ladies ought always to be under proper guidance. How did your mother allow it?" Elizabeth, half amused and half irritated, replied, "We found it suited us, Lady Catherine." This calm resistance, uttered with perfect politeness, startled Lady Catherine, who was unused to being answered at all. She continued her interrogation, asking about their accomplishments, their fortune, their connections, questions Elizabeth parried with wit and composure. Meanwhile, Mr. Collins hung upon every word of his patroness, nodding furiously, repeating her remarks with admiration, and praising her wisdom to the skies. Lady Catherine accepted his adulation as her due, scarcely glancing at him as she dispensed her opinions like royal decrees. Elizabeth could not resist a secret smile. She saw at once that Lady Catherine, though wealthy and titled, was as absurd in her way as Mr. Collins was in his. Both thrived on self-importance. The one demanded reverence, the other supplied it. Yet amid all the pomp, Elizabeth also learned of Lady Catherine's daughter, Miss Anne de Bourgh, a pale, sickly young woman, silent and unremarkable, who seemed overwhelmed by her mother's presence. Elizabeth, observing her with pity, thought ironically, "So this is the lady destined to marry Mr. Darcy." When they returned to the parsonage, Mr. Collins could speak of nothing but the magnificence of Rosings. "Did you not see how kindly Lady Catherine inquired after your family? What condescension, what affability! You must be grateful, dear cousin, for such distinguished notice." Elizabeth, with a mischievous twinkle, replied, "Indeed, I shall treasure her questions about my age and fortune forever." Charlotte, suppressing a laugh, shook her head. "Lizzie, you must not be so sharp. Remember, this grandeur is Mr. Collins's world now." Elizabeth smiled, but in her heart she knew her stay at Hunsford was destined to bring more than just amusement. Lady Catherine was formidable, Charlotte's choice was sobering, and somewhere in this circle loomed the figure of Mr. Darcy, whose unexpected presence would soon alter everything. The days at Hunsford passed with a quiet routine. Charlotte managed her home with good sense. Mr. Collins gloried in every instruction from Lady Catherine, and Elizabeth found amusement in their odd little household. She often walked through the parsonage garden, enjoying the spring air and reflecting on Charlotte's composed endurance. But one morning, Mr. Collins burst into the sitting room, his face flushed with excitement. "News of the greatest importance, my dear ladies," he cried. "Mr. Darcy himself has arrived at Rosings, accompanied by his cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam. Imagine such honour, such condescension, that he should visit his aunt during our stay." Elizabeth froze at the name. Mr. Darcy here? The man whose pride she despised, whose interference had broken her sister's heart. She could not decide whether the thought filled her with dread or a strange anticipation. That evening, Mr. Collins escorted his guests to Rosings, where the company gathered in Lady Catherine's grand drawing-room. Darcy entered with his usual tall, dignified bearing, his features grave and reserved. At his side was Colonel Fitzwilliam, a pleasant, well-mannered gentleman whose easy charm contrasted sharply with his cousin's solemnity. Lady Catherine presided with her usual authority, questioning Elizabeth at once about her family, her upbringing and her accomplishments, but Elizabeth, to her surprise, soon found Darcy's gaze resting upon her. Whenever she spoke, his eyes followed her with an intensity she could not ignore. After tea, Colonel Fitzwilliam struck up a lively conversation with her, teasing Darcy about his silence. "My cousin is never talkative in company, Miss Bennet. He will not trouble himself to speak unless among friends." Elizabeth laughed lightly. "That is a failing, perhaps, for he deprives strangers of the pleasure of knowing him." Darcy's eyes flickered, but he said nothing. In the days that followed, Darcy's presence at Rosings became unavoidable. Though he never sought her directly, Elizabeth found him appearing in her path, meeting her in the garden, joining her walks, or sitting silently near her as she conversed with Colonel Fitzwilliam. His manner was strange, awkward, sometimes brusque, yet marked by an attention that could not be accidental. One afternoon, Elizabeth walked alone along the lane behind the parsonage when Darcy suddenly approached. She greeted him coolly, expecting him to pass with a bow. Instead, he turned and walked beside her in silence. After a few moments, Elizabeth said with irony, "Do you always choose to walk where you are least expected, Mr. Darcy?" Darcy glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps I had hoped to encounter you, Miss Bennet." Elizabeth was startled but recovered quickly. "Then I am fortunate to provide you with such a diversion." Darcy said no more, yet his silence seemed heavy with unspoken thoughts. When they returned to the parsonage, Mr. Collins rushed forward, delighted to see Darcy at Elizabeth's side. Bowing so low it seemed he might topple, Elizabeth, half amused and half confused, withdrew to her room, her mind racing. Why should Mr. Darcy trouble himself with her? Was it disdain, curiosity, or something more dangerous? The mystery deepened when Colonel Fitzwilliam, in a casual conversation a few days later, revealed a confidence. "Darcy is a most loyal friend," he said warmly. "I know of one instance where he saved a dear friend from a most imprudent marriage, though it cost him some unpopularity with the lady's family." Elizabeth's breath caught. Could this be Jane? Could this be why Bingley had left Netherfield? The thought blazed through her, igniting anger and certainty. Darcy had destroyed her sister's happiness. Her dislike of him, already strong, now hardened into fury. Yet beneath her resentment, she could not ignore the strange intensity of his attention, the way his reserve seemed to mask some deeper struggle. Something was building. Elizabeth sensed it. Some storm of words unspoken hung in the air, and soon she knew it would break. It was a grey afternoon, with clouds gathering low over the Kent countryside. Elizabeth had gone out walking, her mind restless after Colonel Fitzwilliam's revelation. Every step she took rekindled her anger. Darcy had interfered. He had destroyed Jane's happiness. He had dared to separate her sister from Bingley. When she returned to the parsonage, she found the house unusually quiet. Charlotte had gone to visit Lady Catherine. Mr. Collins had accompanied her. Elizabeth, left alone, settled in the small sitting room with a book. But she had scarcely read a page when a knock sounded at the door. She looked up and started. Mr. Darcy entered. His face was pale, his manner restless. He walked the room once, as if gathering his thoughts, then stopped before her. "Miss Bennet," he said abruptly, his voice low and strained, "I have struggled in vain. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you." Elizabeth stared, astonished. She had never imagined, never suspected that such words could come from him. Yet, as he continued, the shock gave way to fury. "In vain have I tried to fight it, my sense of your inferiority, the obstacles of family and connections. My rank, my situation, all weighed against my reason, but I cannot conquer my heart. Against every argument I am resolved. I love you, and despite my better judgment, I ask you to marry me." The words, meant as an avowal, fell like blows. His declaration of love was poisoned with pride, his proposal wrapped in insult. Elizabeth rose, her cheeks burning. "In such cases as this," she said coldly, "a lady's feelings ought to be understood at once. If yours had been more gentlemanlike, perhaps I might have been tempted to feel gratitude. But as it is, I have every reason to reject you." Darcy's eyes flashed in shock. "Reject me? You cannot mean—" "Yes, Mr. Darcy, I mean exactly that. From the very beginning, your arrogance, your conceit, your selfish disdain for others, have built a dislike which no declaration could overcome. You are the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed upon to marry." His face darkened. "And this is your opinion of me? This is the reply I am to have the honor of expecting?" Elizabeth's anger surged. "Yes, and I will add more. Do you think I could accept the man who ruined, perhaps forever, the happiness of my dearest sister? Do you think I could marry the man who interfered, who separated Jane and Mr. Bingley? You have been the means of her suffering, and I will never forgive it." Darcy's jaw tightened, his breath sharp, but Elizabeth did not stop. "And if that were not enough, what of Mr. Wickham? You dare to insult him, to ruin him, while you yourself stand blameless? He has told me of your cruelty, your injustice, your selfish pride, and yet you think I should be grateful for your condescension?" Darcy flinched, his composure faltering. He looked at her, his eyes burning with a mixture of pain, disbelief, and wounded pride. "Enough," he said hoarsely. "You have said quite enough." He turned abruptly, pacing the room. For a moment he seemed to struggle for words, but then he stopped, bowed stiffly, and said, "Forgive me for taking up so much of your time. I will not trouble you again." And with that he was gone, Elizabeth stood trembling, her heart pounding with a storm of triumph and fury. She had spoken every word she had longed to say. She had rejected him utterly. And yet, when the door closed behind him, an echo of his words lingered in her mind. "I love you." It was the strangest proposal she could ever have imagined. Half love, half insult, and wholly unforgettable.